Welcome back to Wisdom Wednesday, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. As always, I am your host, Dorothy Dorton, AARP Alabama's Associate State Director of Outreach for Lower Alabama. And I'm really excited about today's topic. We are going to be talking about Alabama folk life and what that means exactly, and how you can preserve your traditions and your stories and your art. Please feel free to ask any relevant questions, as always, in the comments, and we will try to address each of these at the end of the broadcast. We'll also be showing some slides for contact information and things like that. So, please keep in mind of those, but we will also put those in the comments on Facebook afterwards. So you can see those and get to those quickly. So today I am joined by a good friend of mine, Emily Blaivas, who is the Executive Director of Alabama Folklife. And thank you so much for joining us today, Emily.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
You have some great programs with the association, and I really can't wait to hear all about them. I know we've been talking about them, for the past couple of weeks, and I'm just so excited to be here and to have you here and to be talking about it today. So, if you could start with maybe telling us a little bit about yourself, and maybe then kind of explain what folk life is and maybe what the association does.
Yes, sure. So my name is Emily Blaivas. I am the director of the Alabama Folklife Association, or the AFA. I studied rural sociology at Auburn University, and then I had several jobs in community development and research. And I also wrote a book called The Story of Alabama in 14 Foods, which tells a lot of different sort of historical and cultural stories about Alabama, but using food as a lens to do that. So it's kind of a fun way to learn Alabama history. I've been the director of the AFA just since March. So before that, I did a lot of community development type work. But yeah, I think it's a great idea to start just by what folk life is and defining folk life, because can be kind of a nebulous term. But when we think about folk life, we think about those traditions that have been passed down through the generations. And that can be through family, it can be through community, and it can also be through work life. So a folk tradition is one that gets passed down, not something that you just kind of make up on your own, or, something, we like storytelling as a part of folk life. But the stories that get passed down through the generations, those are what we consider to be folk traditions. So with that in mind, folk life is very expansive. It includes music, dance, food traditions. It includes those traditional arts that we think of, like quilting, basket making, woodworking, pottery. It can include remedies. It can include the way that we plant or harvest. It includes stories, like we said, stories that have been passed down. Really anything you can think of that gets passed down through the generations. It also includes what we call occupational folklore or labor lore. So the kinds of traditions maybe that, miners would do before they went underground, or songs you sing, the railroad workers would sing, that kind of thing. But the thing I like to point out too about folk life is that even though we sort of think about it being old-fashioned or old-timey, these are living, breathing traditions. So these are things that people are still doing, and also things that evolve. So they evolve because the environment changes, maybe the materials change, or access to materials. And they also evolve because individual personalities, always leave their mark. So even though you're trained, you could be a 5th generation potter, your pots are going to look just slightly different, than what your father did, or your mother, or your grandmother. And so we also, of course, have traditions, they get passed down through the communities sometimes, and there are also regional variations because of that. So on the Gulf Coast here in Mobile, we have a shrimp net building tradition that gets passed down, in the bayou, or up in Appalachia. There's a lot of sort of folk traditions that are Appalachian in nature, like planting by the signs, or wart healing, that kind of stuff. And then there are cultural traditions that we think of as folk traditions too, like shell carving among the Porch Creek, or the dragon dance in Vietnamese culture. There are those traditions that belong to certain cultures. So it's a very big, expansive field, which makes it a lot of fun because you're always learning something new, interacting with, different people, different traditions. And the thing that's so cool about Alabama is how diverse it is in terms of culture, but also geography and history. And so there's just a lot out there.
Yeah, yeah, and like you said, Alabama is so rich in it. And I know we were talking earlier about you said, for example, quilting, and then you also said that it kind of you can see it through the traditions and through the years kind of morphing. And so we were talking about how you could almost kind of trace a family and what they did and where they lived through what type of fabric they were using, whether it was like flour sacks or things
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I
Exactly.
thought that was really fascinating, and this gives me a better idea of what folk life is because, it's such rich history, but it's not necessarily that history that's always written down because, like you said, it's passed generation to generation to generation. So
Exactly.
I think that's fascinating, and so I know if you can kind of expound on like what um, you know y'all talk about you have some programs that you're working on that our listeners can actually participate in, and
Yeah.
one of those I'd love for you to touch on if you would mind is the tributaries publication because this just sounded like a lot of fun to me and I can't wait to read the next one that comes out. So
Yes, yes, yes. Well, let me back up and just tell you a little bit about
yeah.
the AFA.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes,
So
please
yeah,
do,
no,
please
that
do.
was my bad. So it was founded in 1980. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We're a statewide arts organization. And just like Folklife has a big is a big expansive field, we have sort of a big mission. So our mission is to document, preserve, present, and promote the multicultural folkways of Alabama. So we do that in a lot of different ways. We do the documentation piece through archives, oral histories, interviews, and we also have hands-on workshops. We do programming in communities and in schools, where we'll sometimes focus on a tradition or on a community. We have done big statewide folk festivals in the past. We do performances, we have exhibits. So, really, a lot of different ways that we do our work. And the one that you're talking about, Tributaries, is a journal that contains content on different Alabama folk traditions. So, we have 13 volumes of Tributaries, and we have our 14th coming out next month. So we're really excited about that. There are 5 articles in it, and one of them is on bare earth cemeteries. We have another one on Brookley Field and sort of the community that existed around Brookley Field here in Mobile. We have one on quilting, actually on quilt documentation. So for our listeners, quilting is such a huge tradition in Alabama. So for our listeners who are interested in how to set up a quilt documentation day where everyone brings in their quilts and you document them, like you were talking about the fabrics, but also the makers and the stories behind them.
Yeah.
We have an article that talks about how they did that in their community. And then we have a couple articles on wart healing traditions.
Wow.
That's kind of up in North Alabama. So but the exciting thing about Tributaries is now we are accepting submissions for our next issue. We're planning on publishing it annually. And so we're really trying to cast a wide net. We're really interested, of course, in research and in research articles, but we're also accepting personal essays, photo essays, um, reviews of folk related, exhibits or movies or books. And so if you have a folk tradition, that you're really interested in sharing with us or researching and then writing about, going out and learning more about it and then submitting your work to us, we would love to hear from you. I'm really excited to get that journal out again into the world. So
That's really exciting, and I apologize. I jumped the gun. I didn't realize that the Alabama Folk Life Association has been around since, you said, 1981. Is that right?
80,
So
yes. So we're celebrating
1980.
40 years.
That's
Yes,
awesome.
yes.
Happy
It's
40th.
awesome.
So
Yeah. We work
yeah.
very closely with the Alabama State Council on the Arts. They're just a huge foundational partner and touchstone for us,
Right.
particularly the Alabama Center for Traditional Culture. But yes, we are a standalone nonprofit and been doing work for 40 years, and which is
Wonderful.
great for me. We also have what's called the Archive of Alabama Folk Culture, and that is located at the Alabama Department of Archives and History in Montgomery, and is curated by their expert or managed by their experts, which is great. So all of our work
Yeah.
is archived, and so it can exist in perpetuity, and researchers can use it both online and in person.
Oh,
So
that's
that's a
great.
really important part of what we do, when we go out
Yeah.
and collect or document.
Yeah.
All of our tributaries, issues, and articles are in those
Mm.
archives, and also on our website. So you know that when you work with us, your work will be preserved, which I think is really important. I love
Yeah.
to get in those archives and look back at the photos that my now colleagues took, 20, 30
Yeah.
years ago. It's
I bet.
exciting.
I
Yeah.
bet. That just sounds like so much fun. I'm sure I could probably spend hours in there.
Yes,
That
and they
just,
take donations from people across Alabama. So that's another thing. If you have something in your family or in your possession that you are concerned about passing down, and you'd rather give it to the archives, they will work with you to figure out how to make that happen. So it's another good thing
awesome.
to know about them. Yeah, and all of this
Excellent.
is on our website. You can find all those
Excellent. Well, I
programs
wanted
and links.
that is so cool. Thank you so much. And I did put that up, that information up, and it will be in the comments on the Facebook after this post. I will put that up there as a picture. But I want to share this comment with us real quick. And this is from, and I apologize if I don't get this right, but Sue Lynn Cresswell. She says, "Good morning from your friends at Black Belt Treasures Cultural Arts Center in Camden."
Yay! Good
So,
morning.
hello,
Yes,
good
Black Belt
morning.
Treasures is a treasure. For those,
Excellent.
I'm sure that our listeners from the Black Belt are aware of Black Belt Treasures because they've done such
Yeah.
great work for so long.
Oh,
But
good.
please look them up in Camden, Alabama. If
Yeah.
you're not aware of them, they work with artists from throughout the Black Belt. They have a gallery, and they have a lot of educational programs as
Yeah.
well. But
Oh, cool.
especially as the holiday season starts to creep up and you're
Yep.
looking for those really special Alabama gifts,
Yeah.
Black Belt Treasures is a great place to go. They have an online store.
Oh,
So
that's a great idea. Thank
mhm.
you. And I wanted to talk about another great program that you have, and this one to me is really exciting. Um, is the Falcon 5. And this is actually something where people can send in their stories or talk about their art on video and stuff. And can you talk a little bit about Falcon 5 for us?
Yeah, so Falcon 5 is our response to COVID, one of our responses to COVID, as we're all scrambling to try to figure out how to exist in this world. I didn't want to stop sort of, I couldn't go out in person and do the documentation. Still can't.
Mhm.
And I love to do in-person interviews and take photographs and do that kind of stuff in person. But because we couldn't do that, we created the Falcon 5 program, which is very simple. Basically, we're just asking you to make a 5-minute video about your folk tradition and to send it to us. So right now, those videos aren't posted. We're in a collection phase. And just like we talked about, the tradition could be, a recipe. It could be something that you make that your mother and grandmother made. It could be a remedy. It could be something like a basket or a pot that you do. Anything that's been passed down. Those are the kind of traditions that we're looking for, and we're just going to post those so that Alabamians can see, the diversity of what we do, so that we can preserve those traditions, and that so we can learn more about what people are doing out there.
Yeah.
So it's also a good way just to see kind of what's being preserved. Because the thing about folk life is that because it evolves and it changes, if we don't capture it, there's a lot that we lose.
Right. Right.
So that was another sort of purpose of Falcon 5 is just
Yeah.
to hear from people themselves about what they're doing and what's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's one of those things that personally for me, just my grandmother grew up in very rural Northwest Mobile County. And, it was just so great to hear the stories that she told. And, she was one of 13. She was one of the youngest of 13 children, 14 children, sorry. And she was born in the house. And we were
Mm-hmm.
actually very fortunate to still have that house up until about 15 years ago. And but just hearing her stories before she passed away and how she grew up, really living off the land with her family and how they kind of came together and all the stuff that they did and the traditions that they had, it was just really amazing. And the one thing that kind of saddens me is that I can't tell that story like she told that story. So, and I
Yeah.
can't tell it to my children, like I would like to. Like I would love for them to be able to hear it from her voice and her perspective. And so this is such a wonderful way for people to have that legacy. And as you said, with working with the archives, it's actually something that lives in perpetuity, like you said. So this is
Mm-hmm.
something that you can create and send in and have such a wonderful legacy to leave. Your children can see it, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, your great great grandchildren. I mean, it's such a wonderful treasure. So this is a great
Yeah.
program, and
And I hope, we're not asking for, you can make the video on your phone. We're not asking you to do anything
mhm.
fancy. And I hope too that kind of once we move past the pandemic that we can work with some schools to do
Yeah,
Falcon 5. I think it's a great thing. I have a fourth grader
yeah,
right now who's learning Alabama history, and I think this would be a great thing, for
yeah,
fourth grade students to find someone who's older in their community and just record, a story. Or, we've talked about trying to do this with senior centers,
yeah,
have the
yeah.
seniors who are there just talk about their traditions. And so there's a lot of ways that
Absolutely.
you can make it multi-generational.
Yeah,
So
absolutely,
yeah, we're hoping to
absolutely.
keep expanding.
That's great. And a quick side note, we have a comment that's popped up again from the Black Belt Treasure Cultural Arts Center. And just a little plug, they actually received one of the AARP community grants, community challenge grants that we have that usually the request for proposals goes out in the spring. So if there's a nonprofit out there that's interested in that, keep an eye out. We'll probably talk about it on a Wisdom Wednesday, probably sometime next year. So and that's really cool. They were able to do some mosaic benches with some local artists, so to talk about the history of Camden. But and getting back to a Falcon 5 real quick, I do want to say, I know that especially in this virtual world, technology is just kind of weird. So if you are interested in doing this, of course you can reach out to Emily. But I'm throwing my email address up there. If you are interested in having a recording, but you're not quite sure how to do that, feel free to reach out to me. And, AARP can maybe help kind of get y'all together, work out the technology to get your story told and to get you, to have your legacy made. So that is my email address. And I'll pop that back up in the comments later. But I do want to show one more time Alabama Folklife and their information here. So,
Yeah. So when you go to that website, alabamafolklife.org, you'll see everything that we've been talking about. There's
mhm,
a page on tributaries, the journal, and how to send in your submission. There's a page on Falcon 5, and so you'll find all that information. But that's my email, alabamafolklife@gmail.com. So please
mhm,
feel free to reach out about anything. And then like the slide shows
yeah,
you, we're Alabama Folklife on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. So you can find us pretty easily. And on the website too, at the bottom of every page, you can sign up for our email notices. I don't bombard you. It's just a quarterly newsletter. So if you want to kind of keep up with what we're doing, that's another great way just to sign up for our list.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, a quarterly newsletter sounds perfect. Not too much, not too
Not too
little.
much.
So
Yeah, we
that's
don't need to be
great.
blasting you all the time. So
Yeah, and you said that the other volumes of tributaries are available on the website too, so
they
people can go
are.
back and read those and get some kind of
That's
maybe get
right.
some ideas of stories to tell and things like that. So that's a really great idea. A couple of questions that we've gotten are if if folks do send a video, is there any specific format? You said on the phone, just they could record it on their iPhone per se, and just kind of email it in to you or send it to you.
Yep,
Okay.
you can do really anything that's whatever's
Mhm.
easiest for you because we can figure out on our end
Yeah.
how to get it in the format we need.
Sure.
So, yep,
Excellent. Excellent.
yeah.
Okay. And then when people do make these videos, do they need to sign a release or anything? Is there
Yeah, once you send it in, I will send back a release, which we do online. So there's no paper or printing or scanning or anything like that. It's just a real simple form that you fill out online that it gives
yeah.
us permission to post it. So yeah,
Excellent.
that's
Awesome,
what we'll
Emily.
do.
So this has just been really educational for me today, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm actually going to talk to my dad about Falcon 5 because I think he might have some good stories to tell too. And knowing what folk life is, it's that traditional word of mouth type sending, and cultural, traditional stuff that's not necessarily written down in the history books, but it's more of a family closeness.
Yeah, just
That's really
anything that
good.
gets passed down, through
Yeah,
the generations. And a lot of times it is oral. I mean, if you think
yeah,
about how you learn how to cook,
hmm
it's often just standing with someone and watching what they do and doing what they do.
right,
Or,
right.
if you learn a
Yeah,
song, you learn that just by listening and playing along. So a lot of it
yeah,
isn't written
right.
down, which
Yeah,
is how it gets passed down, which is neat. But then again, we want to make sure that we're collecting it so that we preserve it, for
absolutely,
history. So, yeah, and I would
absolutely.
just encourage people too, as kind of a final thought, just to document as much as you can. I always say that when I go out and talk about the food book that I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
When I went out and interviewed people for that book, um, I was just so aware of all the stories that I was. The shameless plug.
Sorry,
Um,
shameless plug. Sorry, it's a
that
great book.
I
I just have to say. So,
all the stories that I wasn't capturing. I mean, there's only 14 foods in that book, and there are only just, 14 or whatever stories. And so there's just so much out there. And so I would just encourage people, even if you just sit
yeah.
down with someone in your family and turn the recorder on your phone and get them to talk about their life. I mean, like you were saying about your grandmother, if we don't do
hmm
it now and prioritize it, we lose the
Right.
opportunity. You don't have to
Absolutely.
be a professional writer. You don't have to be a professional filmmaker. The point is to collect the story however you feel comfortable doing it,
Mm,
or to collect the tradition however you feel comfortable doing it. And of course,
absolutely.
we have Thanksgiving coming up, which is a
Yep.
great time, to make
Yeah.
some plans, to do some family interviews, or to pass something along, when you're gathered together with your
Yeah.
family. So this is a great timing to kind of think about that.
Absolutely. And we have one more question that just popped up. If you don't mind answering or talking about this, it says, does the Folklife Association have information on sacred harp singing or shape note singing? Do y'all?
Yes, we actually so if you'll email me, I'll help direct you. But we did a whole issue of tributaries on sacred music,
Oh, wow.
and yes, and David Ivy, who is sort of our sacred harp guru in Alabama, was recognized by the as a National Heritage Fellow, is the board chair of the AFA, and we
Okay.
have a lot of sacred harp. Just music and recordings in our archives. So we also do an annual singing event at the Capitol in Montgomery. It's usually falls in January or February. So we have a lot of stuff on Sacred Harp and Shape Note. So please reach out by email and I'll help connect you to what you're looking for.
That's
That's a
fascinating.
huge Alabama tradition too. Really, just like quilting, just really important for
And see, that's
Alabama.
something I had no idea about. When I saw the question, I was like, am I even asking this right? Like, that's amazing. That's so cool. So, and
Yes, in
I
fact,
just popped up your email address down there on the bottom,
okay, good.
too. So yeah, so people can reach out to you about Falcon 5, about tributaries, about the Sacred Heart music. So yeah, Emily, I just want to thank you again so much for joining us today. And I
Thank
really
you for
look forward
having
to
me.
yeah, I really look
This
forward to
has been
maybe
fun.
yeah, it really has. And I want to. I'm excited to be to maybe work with you on this and work with some folks in Alabama because this is statewide. This isn't just in any area. This is all over the state. If you have a story,
That's
let
right.
us know. Like I said, I'll be happy to help out with the kind of tech issues or technology or something like that we if anybody has any questions about that. And again, Emily, thanks so much for joining us. And
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, this has been great. So guys, we are finishing up, and I do want to show our usual video of what's coming up. We've got some great ones. Our music Thursday night is going to be just as great as ever. So hang on, and we'll show that video in just a second. And don't forget, next Wisdom Wednesday, we are going to be having all the information about voting safe in Alabama because we want you to vote, but we want you to do it safely and we want you to feel comfortable doing it. So thanks again, everybody. Stay healthy and stay wise.